specializing for speed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you for sticking around. It's hard to go after Saeed, but we're going to try to make it work for us. So we're still on the accelerator theme, as you know. I mean, you obviously are all interested in it. Just take whatever seat you feel like, comfortable with. And why this panel is going to be interesting is because we have geographical diversity, China, UK, France. So different examples, different ways of doing stuff, and also different business models. So maybe we're going to have a brief introduction first, starting with you, Sabine. Just tell us what you're doing, like in 2 minutes perhaps each, and then we'll get into the topic.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Sabine Vanderlinden. I run Startup Bootcamp INSURTECH globally. So what we do is we work with corporates, so insurance companies. I work with around 30 insurance companies globally who are actually investors in my accelerator. And every year we accelerate 10 startups. We source startups which are interested to work with insurance companies all around the world. So last year, for instance, we talked to over 4,000 startups to actually reduce that to 10 to work with corporates all around Europe at the moment and also in the US. At the end of the program, the startups either get into projects with the corporates we're working with, so to drive their traction, and then they work with an investor pool as well to get their first round of funding. So usually seed funding up to Series A.
Okay, Benjamin, it's a different story. You started up in China. Hopefully you'll have some sound. Do you want my mic?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm from China. I've been living in Asia for over 15 years. I lived in Japan, Korea, China, and mostly what we do at Hacks is invest in hardware startups. So startups that go from consumer hardware, but also a lot of enterprise, a lot of robots, a lot of health tech companies. And our model, and the reason we're in China is because we feel that Shenzhen in particular, in the south of China, is the best place to build hardware. So we invest in about 40 to 50 companies every year, coming from all around the world, half of them coming from the US and Canada. We've done a few investments from France, and we bring them to China for a few months so they can iterate on their prototypes much faster, use the supply chain, get a product ready, and then we have a second phase from our program where they go to San Francisco to enter the US market and get distribution. So we typically invest $250,000 in a mix of cash and resources in every company.
That's quite a lot. So the last one is kind of a UFO. I mean, first we're French. I mean, you're French. And also it's a very new business model. So you're going to tell us all about it, but it's a philanthropic one.
Correct. When we raised 4 years ago with Clara Guémard, is more for sharing success than for success. In fact, we create a private equity fund, which is not a fund, it's an evergreen structure to invest in companies, ticket between 10 and 40 million euros. We have 400 million euros under management. We have invested in 11 companies. We have another fund with Raise IMO for real estate of 300 million euros. We buy 2 buildings. We are launching a Raise Venture. But all of this, the guy who work with us, including us, we share 50% of our carry for our foundation. We give back 50% of our carry to this foundation. The foundation is Res Sherpa, which work as an accelerator than an incubator on a pro bono basis. So all the purpose of Raise, which have now less than 800 million euros under management, is to give money to this foundation to share success, to help startups to bridge, and to make bridges between startups and big corporate, because we have more than 50 corporates in our capital.
Yeah, that's interesting. The theme of the roundtable is how do they better cater to the startup needs? And I'd like you to tell us how your business model has evolved over the years to be able to do that, make a difference with startups, better cater the sectors you were aiming at. Like, for instance, you're now in the insurance business, but you didn't start there. It was a much wider field. Can you give us a little example of how the story went down?
So Startup Bootcamp started in 2010. Our founders actually went to Silicon Valley to talk to some of the guys you all know, the Y Combinators and the tech stars. And actually they opened their doors and they told us, come in and we'll show you what we do, actually. And in 2010, our founders went back to Europe and they decided to design vertical program, so industry-focused program, and work with corporates. So we need the corporates to work with us, or a group of corporates, to actually want to change their world with startups. So a bit like the little hive you have here, a little village. So we started actually with mobile. We then went in 2012 with fintech. We went into fintech, and then actually a number of insurers at the end of 2014 approached us and said, you know what, we are not fintech. We want an insurance program for us. And that literally, that's the way we actually, at the end of 2014, started to fundraise for insurance tech. We have digital health, we have smart city program, we have transportation program, we have 20 programs in 15 cities globally with amazing MDs, and the goal is to work with a group of professionals within corporates for an industry, and then source startups and help them work with those corporates who find their first projects. So it's B2B. We tend to focus on Bs, B2B or B2B2C, and then help them find their first rounds of funding with our investor portfolios.
So it's interesting because you really had to go vertical in order to better service the corporations of your environment and the startups who wanted to get into that. You have a different approach because you try to service the startups at different stages of their lives. You started in hardware, but you went away, well, you're still in it, but you developed elsewhere. And also at the different stages of the startup life, which I think is really an expansion that you should explain.
Yeah, so when we started was really at the very beginning of the IoT boom around 2012. And I think we caught a wave really early and we were in the right place. I think Shenzhen was a strategic location and provided a really strong competitive advantage. But at that time, we were thinking that our job was to help companies make a product, and that was it, or maybe help them raise some funding. But quickly we realized that they had more problems than that. And the founders were very technical, and they knew how to make an early prototype, but they didn't know how to do everything else that you need to do to build a company. So sometimes they needed to rethink the strategic positioning of their product. They needed to kind of simplify it. So we had to help them understand that. Then even when you have a prototype that's quite advanced, you need to learn about manufacturing, you need to learn about logistics, you need to learn about sourcing, and you also need to learn about marketing, PR, fundraising, distribution, all those things. So we decided to create several stages of acceleration, a little bit like a space shuttle. You start with the first boosters, and then you go to orbit, and you need several stages. The first stage is to go from prototype to product. That's what we do in Shenzhen, between 4 to 8 months acceleration. We have a team of about 30 experts over there to help from industrial design to electronics, sourcing, a lot of other functions. The second stage in San Francisco, when you have a product, you want to be able to distribute it and scale it. So there's a 2-month acceleration program over there where we connect them to retailers. We help them learn the language of distribution, on sales and marketing. And now we're actually working on a third stage, which is preparing for exits. Because we have now, in 5-6 years, about 200 companies we invested in, and some of them are quite mature. And what we realized is that there's a lot of conversation about how you start your company, how you do the lean startup phase, and now there's a lot of conversation around growth, but there's very little conversation about exits. And all those startups that are around, and all those investors investing in them, exits is the moment where the value really gets recognized. And it's a really important moment, and nobody's prepared among startups. So that's a new program we're working on. We're actually doing some workshops next month in 4 different cities, in Paris, London, New York, San Francisco. We call that an exit masterclass. And that's to learn how you prepare for your exit. And the preparation starts generally 1, 2, 3 years before you actually exit. You start to reshape your executive team, you start to clarify your product roadmap, you engage with potential buyers, and you do all this work. So that's the 3 stages we're working on.
Yeah, we'll come back to the exit strategy. Gonzague, what is really interesting in Raise, apart that it's philanthropic, which is kind of unusual, it's also the way how you plug startups with customers and big corporate accounts. Can you tell us how that works for you?
Yeah, first of all, when we create, it's not a long time ago, Raise, 4 years ago, we make a study on 1 year on the French market, what's happened in terms of incubators, accelerators. There is a lot of initiative on this purpose. And we decided to don't compete with them. So with the foundation Reshaper, we organize 4 programs to help bridges between big corporate and startup, because time is money for startup. First of all, we attribute loans, no interest, no warranty for 6 years for the startup who want to grow. We are very selective, we assume that. And for the moment, we give 30 loans to 30 startups. Second program, we organize coaching, learning, mentoring with a big manager of big group, great manager of big group and the startup. We have done more than 100 programs like that. The third program is Raise Experts. We ask to big audit companies, strategic auditors, lawyers, to help during one time the startup, because sometimes they have to stop and to think about their future, to think about their business plan, to think about their strategy. And the last program is linked to the last guy, Simon, who explained, you know, in the corporate group there is a lot of MBA, internal MBA for high potential.
Right.
We plug some startups between 6 and 12 startups to this program for 6 months or 12 months. And at the end of the program, the startup gives a note to the group and the group gives a note to the startup.
Okay.
All of this is pro bono.
Okay.
And all of this is because all the partners share 50% of their carry. So that's the main strategy for us. Our purpose is to sharing success. Yeah. And when the group and the startup and the people of Raise are all together to sharing success is very helpful for startups.
But do you take any equity at all in those companies?
Never. Reshaper is a foundation, and for example, the loan is no interest, no warranty. All is for free. Never forget,
Okay.
all is for free.
It's a good thing to know those guys, right? If you're looking for a quick, fast, cheap accelerator, because the interest of it, basically, as you say, is to build the ecosystem, right? That you choose who you want to work with, and you want everybody to be successful together.
Yeah, to be very honest, when I raised this fund with Clara, we asked to the company to give money to us, and we say we want to give you the best return we can, but please, in return, you have to help us in our foundation. So when we ask to a group like Danone, like Total, like L'Oreal to help us on a specific purpose with a startup, we give a call, and in 2 weeks, on 1 week, we could have the meeting between the startup and the group, which is very helpful for the startup.
Do you think that over the years, the demands of the entrepreneurs have changed regarding accelerators? Are they more demanding? What have you noticed in the relationship you have with them, Sabine?
So when we started, I'm going to talk for INSURTECH, because I'm sure my colleagues who are running different programs have probably different experience. But when I started INSURTECH 3 years ago, the industry didn't really exist. The sector didn't exist. So we called it actually at the time Startup Bootcamp Insurance, and we rebranded it INSURTECH within 6 months. And actually AXA are the one who actually started using that word. And what we saw is we actually were building a little bit of a sector where startups which came into insurance tech didn't always have the insurance understanding. Now, I would say that INSURTECH, there is like at least 2,000 startups which are being evaluated or receive investment. 11 billion.
In Europe or
globally, so
over
11
Europe?
billion have been invested in INSURTECH startups.
Okay.
Those are there are around 2,000 startups, and the investment only represents 30% of the total group of startups. So there is a 60 to 70% startups which are coming to the market, have not raised any money yet.
Yeah.
And they are becoming more sophisticated. So not only the startup, but also the corporate. And what I mean by that is that the startups now have their own industry. They, for sure, don't always want to give you the equity. I take 6% equity in the program. And so if you want quality, you have to negotiate much harder. Now, also the corporates are becoming more mature, working with startups. And so they are looking for a different format of engagement to get into the commercial pilots and achieve value for their businesses. So yes, it has changed from 3 years ago, very, very different needs.
Yeah. So they're more savvy, more educated, they know what they want.
Yeah. They don't always understand the industry, so when they come, we teach them insurance, the language, how to deal with closing deal in insurance. There are complex strategies to build, actually. But in general, they are much more sophisticated.
At the same time, entrepreneurs are driven by a vision. They know what they want. They want to, if they come to you, they want to get some speed. They need quick mentoring. Did you see that change a lot, Ben? The mentoring you give them, do you have to be better at it today, or?
For sure, yeah. I mean, today there's probably about, 3,000 accelerators around the world, like 1,000 US or North America, 1,000 Europe, 1,000 in Asia. I think if you're doing like kind of generic things, like consumer software and apps, the problem is that you don't necessarily have first choice of startups. You have Y Combinator that attracts pretty much the best ones, and everybody else is like far behind. So if you want, just like a startup, in a way, an accelerator has to be very differentiated and offer something that would help companies clear milestones. In our case, it's about building a product. If you go to a generic accelerator that don't know anything about hardware, how are you going to make it, right? So our offering also evolved a lot because when we started, I think we were the first one actually focusing on hardware back in 2012. And we were the best because we were the first one. But quickly, a few others appeared, not necessarily in Shenzhen, so that stayed an advantage. And 5 years ago, we were investing $25,000, and we had 5 people to help the companies. Now we invest $250,000, that's 10 times more, and we have over 30 people in Shenzhen. We have another office with like 5 people in San Francisco. We've built a huge network. And I think now that you have enough time to look at what actually came out of those accelerators, a lot of founders, they do due diligence. They look at you. They talk to companies who came out, and they do their research. And a lot of people talk a big talk, but at the end of the day, proof is in the pudding. You look at what comes out, and if you see good companies, if they tell you, this is how my company changed from before and after, then you will feel that something good is happening.
Is geography important? For instance, you're a French company, so you're really tailoring the local French market. But do you have wider international ambitions, or do you want to stick to the French market?
At the beginning, we want to work on the French market. Just a quick remark.
Yes.
For sure, I'm the oldest guy on this panel. And honestly, 5 years ago,
who knows?
10 years ago, this startup market, there is a huge evolution of this startup market. And when you have a good manager with a good idea, you need to have, first of all, advice, secondly, contact, and thirdly, money. Cash is a commodity now, if you have a good, you agree with me?
Yeah, I mean, cash is a means to an end.
Yeah. So
the network is very important.
That's the first point. But they need to have a result, and benevolence. It's very important. I insist on that because on Raise, we start again in France, and we start with the idea of sharing success, which is very important for us. Yes, we could go out of France, but if we go out of France, first of all, we go with our shareholders, because they are big corporate and they help startups to go out of their French market. Secondly, we think about a franchise of Raise. Fondation Raise could be built in Germany, in Africa, in a lot of countries with the same ecosystem. This ecosystem is a very big group, give money to invest. It's a middle-sized company to win money, and with the sharing of the career of the team, we could build this foundation. We could do this everywhere. So we think about helping startups outside of France, but we think also about franchise or Raise ecosystem.
I'd like to come back to the exit strategy because I find it pretty wild at the startup stage. I mean, I understand why VC would think about it because that's what they're aiming for. But as an incubator, I was really surprised by it. And you said that it's something that you feel is important now to go start early with entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so maybe I should clarify. So we start with accelerators, but we're actually a fund. So behind Hacks is a company called SOSV, which is $300 million global fund. And basically the accelerator is the entry point for investments. We take a chunk of equity for pretty cheap capital, and then we keep investing. So we kind of pretty long-term investors. And when you invest so early, you know your exits are going to take 5 to 10 years. 5 really like either the bad cases or the good cases, depending. But essentially, I think it goes along the mission of accelerators, which is we need in the business of education. VC business is essentially spotting trends early and making introductions to make the business happen and to select the right things. But accelerators have an education mission because founders come in with limited skill sets. There's a lot of things they're good at in technology, typically, and there's a lot probably they know quite well the customers, but then they need to learn everything else. So there's all those learning curves they have to go through, and if they do it on their own, they can make a lot of mistakes. It can take a lot of time, and the idea of accelerators overall, I think, is to shorten those learning curves, get them the minimum skill set they need to survive, like this kind of the Anna Karenina principle. Like all happy families are alike, but there's so many ways to fail in a startup. You can't be too bad at anything.
Gonzague wants to add
I have
something.
a question for you, Benjamin. When you success,
Yes.
how did you share your success?
Well, first you have to define success because our startups are still pretty young. So in terms of, for us, success as an investor is return on capital. That's what our LPs are looking for. That's what we paid for, and that's how we financially succeed. But the mission is also the impact. The mission is the development of entrepreneurs. The mission is the creation and nourishment of ecosystems. I think it's kind of multiple, quintuple bottom line or something.
Okay, but you think about impact.
Of course, yeah. I mean, hardware, I think, is fantastic for that because it has impact on the physical world. Like if you want to do ag tech, if you want to actually work with the land, if you want to do health tech and work with the body, if you want to work with the physical world, you need hardware. So it has massive impact for sure, yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up because we're at the end of our time. Thank you very much to the three of you for exposing your business models, different accelerator models all over the place. Thanks for sticking around and have a great day at VivaTech.